Today, I want to talk a little bit about the issue of free speech. You might be thinking, free speech. I have plenty of free speech. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But the issue has kind of become a topic recently, really around the idea of internet censorship and how much control should social media and internet companies have over what people are allowed and able to say on those platforms. The reason it became a big topic here in the past couple of days is there was an article that was published by a prominent news outlet discussing some scandalous things about a candidate's son. And apparently the social media companies didn't like that, and they began to censor the content. A lot of people, including many conservatives, got a little upset about that, which is kind of good in a sense that it's brought this issue front and center again. That's what I want to talk about today. If you don't know, I'm Christopher Scott from the Christopher Scott Show podcast. I'm an author. I broadcast the daily podcast. There's no ads on the podcast. There's nothing to buy. There's nothing to sign up for. I do it completely free every day, 5 days a week. Independent podcast. I do it for the simple reason that I love this country, trying to get the good word out, trying to get people thinking about some of the issues going on today. You can find the Christopher Scott Show on most podcast players, YouTube. You can also go to ChristopherScottShow.com. You can listen right there on the website. Just open it up in your internet browser and you can play it right there. While you're there, right on the homepage, you can contact me. It says that, leave a message. It's easy to find. You do that, and the message comes into me on an app on my phone, and I can get back to the listener, which I do, and I appreciate that feedback. So if you want to mention anything about what I say today or any ideas you have for me for future content or any comments about this or anything else, I'm happy to hear it at ChristopherScottShow.com. So let's get back to this idea of free speech and internet content and what should happen there. I want to first discuss this idea of censorship in general. Should there be any censorship? Should it just be completely free speech? There's a few problems with that, right? One is just a basic level of appropriateness. You don't go into a bar and start preaching the gospel. Some people do, but it gets a little kooky, right? And vice versa. You don't go into a church and then put your hand up and say, hey, I want to talk about whiskey sours here for a little while. It's not appropriate to do those things. And you could go a lot further with that topic. What do you do when the things are available for children to see and in a family environment? There's just a certain level of appropriateness. And we already know, right, from grade school that, yeah, we have free speech, but it's not completely unrestricted. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Why is that? Well, because you're putting the public safety at risk, and public safety has been determined to override complete unregulated free speech. But to that end, I would say, how about the censorship and the things going on the internet and social media? If the things that are going on there are affecting public safety, shouldn't they also necessarily be regulated as well? I think in the basic case of fairness, you'd have to say yes to that question. That'll make more sense as I go through this a little bit. The other thing that maybe you've heard going around is this topic of Section 230. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to quote it chapter and verse, but essentially it's this. It was a bipartisan law, meaning both parties supported it, that allowed internet companies and social media to enjoy no liability, meaning that you can't sue them, you can't go after them for things like slander, fake news, false reporting, and things like that. There was a distinction made between publishers like a newspaper that control their content and social media companies that, hey, we can't control what people put on here. And part of the argument that's now going on where people are saying, wait a minute, you're enjoying this no limits, no liability, but at the same time you are censoring, so you are controlling the content, and you can't have it both ways. I think there's something else interesting about 230 and this bipartisan law. You've probably heard about people losing their jobs and getting themselves in trouble in different ways for things that they said or did on social media. Isn't it kind of funny that we're supposed to have a government of the people, by the people, a government that's supposed to be protecting our constitutional rights, and somehow big tech ended up with the protection and the people ended up with a mess, really, when you think about it. But I think these issues of whether or not to censor, I think the social media companies, they have somewhat of a duty, somewhat of a moral obligation to create some rules of engagement. You see this even in private groups where they say, hey, here's the rules. Everybody has to abide by the rules. And that's some people's argument about what's going on. They're saying, hey, wait a minute. Why is there a different set of rules for liberals versus conservatives? And there's some merit to that and some dangers in that as well. But I think the thing that gets missed in all this liability and whether or not there should be restrictions or not is the secret algorithms. I'm sure you've heard the term. I always point out to people, say, hey, before you heard about secret algorithms, which are not so secret, by the way, you didn't have a fake news problem. What's going on exactly? Well, I say they're not so secret because people have learned how to game the system, and that's a problem in and of itself. You have people that, where they say, well, please like, comment, and share. Well, the reason they're doing that is to game the system, to get additional traction so that the social media company or the internet companies, the people are interested in this, and it puts it out more. But here's the thing, the bottom line about the secret algorithms. Instead of you determining what you see, the social media or internet company is determining what they want you to see. I see that as being highly dangerous. They say, it's in so that we can deliver better ads. Well, it's affecting a lot more than just delivering better ads. It's affecting a lot of different things. And that's a big problem. It's creating a warped sense of reality and the practical implications of all this. And this is what I want you to take away in this short video. Number one, there's been volumes done, studies done, and people very high within social media companies that are going to tell you exactly what I'm about to tell you right now. Number one, these issues are having an effect on elections around the world. It's affecting democracy. That in turn affects freedom and people's voices in a very negative way. Secondly, I mentioned at the beginning of the video here, I said, hey, wait a minute. If you can't yell fire in a crowded theater because the government has determined that the protection of public safety is more important than just unrestricted free speech, wouldn't that mean that it would go the other way as well? Well, what's happening with social media via this censorship and the secret algorithms is that two things. It's affecting people's mental health. I've been talking about this since I started the podcast over 3 years ago. I remember doing an episode where I had looked at a study that said that what happens to your brain when you're using social media is not that much different than the way crack cocaine affects your brain. And this is happening to society on a massive, massive scale. It's creating a public health epidemic. And for no other reason, there really needs to be something done about it. But the last thing I want to leave you with is the fact that what's happening on social media particularly, but also on the internet, is creating so much division within our society. I don't necessarily think that these are black and white issues and not totally easy to solve, but not completely impossible to solve either. And I think work needs to be done. I think it's important that it happens now. I'm hoping that our government steps up and does the right thing. Hey, I'm Christopher Scott. I hope you visit ChristopherScottShow.com. It's always been my goal to bring issues, bring awareness to issues, and encourage people to think about them in different ways so that you can make up your own mind. I'm not going to tell you how or what to think, but at least give you things to think about. I hope I did that today. Make it a great day.
Warning, this podcast includes unapologetic logic and reason and may not be suitable for all audiences. In a world full of nonsense, he's been called the voice of uncommon common sense. He sees the abnormal that many find normal. Author and award-winning speaker, he is Chris